Hello everyone, I'm Kim and welcome to my sewing room. I hope you're all really well and are starting to get into the Christmas mood. After last week when I made some bunting for my son George and his girlfriend Danny, I thought I would carry on the Christmas theme by making some Christmas placemats. Now I haven't done anything like this before, and because I had so much Christmas fabric left over, I really did want to use up as much as I could, and I've been having quite a bit of fun playing around with all of this lovely Christmassy fabric. So I made up a placemat and it's used up quite nice pieces of fabric. So any small pieces I've just managed to get these smaller bits out of. So it's been quite nice to use up some scraps, and I like the design because it also gave me an opportunity to really mix all of those colours up. So I thought what I would do is, because I want to make 6 of these, so I thought what I would do is I would show you how I make them, and hopefully at the end I can show you all of my 6 placemats because they will be all slightly different. So on the front I've created this quilted effect, and on the back it just has a piece of Christmassy fabric, and you can see I have used some free motion stitching. I haven't done free motion stitching before and it was such fun. It was so quick and it is very addictive. I really enjoyed doing that and I'm quite looking forward to doing the others now. I have bound around each of the placemats, well the 2 that I've done so far, and that has worked out really well. So I thought I would share how I pulled these together with you. So how did I create the design? Well, I saw this image in a book for a quilt, and it was a big round, it looked like a big round dartboard, but effectively I've only taken a quarter of that design to make my placemat. So that design is broken up into 5 pieces. So these are the 5 pattern pieces that have been created. So I pinned them to the placemat so you can see how it's all brought together. So the first 4 are just literally the bit that makes out the circular design, and this 5th piece is just to square off the placemat to make it square. And this will then make up a placemat 13 inches square. So obviously if you want anything bigger, then just create bigger pattern pieces. So with that said, I decided that I wanted 6 placemats, so I needed two each of these for each placemat, so that was 12 in total of A, B, C, D and E. So as well as the front panel of your placemat, you will also need some wadding. So I've cut some wadding, about 13.5 inch squared, so that will sit in between the front panel and the back panel. So the back panel is also 13.5 inch squared, and I've just cut this from the larger pieces of Christmas fabric. So I'm going to run a video just going through how I've made this up. Nothing special. It will run quite quickly, so you'll just see how it comes together. They have come together quite well. So I've got 4 more to make and I'm hoping to get them all done by the end of this video, so hopefully you will see them all finished at the end. See you in a minute. So here you can see I have my first 4 fabric pieces and I'm going to start preparing them before I stitch them. So with each of them I'm just finding the center point and making a notch, and I'm working my way through each piece. So here you can see me bringing all of these fabric pieces together. So the first 2 are being pinned and the curve is quite strong, so you just need to make sure that you align the sides and pin quite a lot into this curve, easing the fabrics together. Once fully pinned, stitch together with 1/4 inch seam allowance and trim that seam allowance by half. Then move on to your next section. Match your center notch and your end sections, and then continue to pin. This curve is not as severe, so it should be easier to pin, but still will need you to ease the fabric together. Stitch with 1/4 inch seam allowance and trim that seam allowance down by half. Then move on to your last section, and the same applies. Match up your center notch and pin the 2 end sections, and then ease the fabric in, stitch and trim. Make a second triangle, then give them a good press, pin them together, ensuring that the seams are aligned. Stitch with 1/4 inch seam allowance again and trim that seam allowance down by half. Press before moving on to the top section. So with these 2 pieces, you need to just find your center point on the curve. So just cut a center point notch. Then bring these 2 pieces together. Stitch with 1/4 inch seam allowance and trim back by half. Then give your work a good press. So bring these 2 pieces together by aligning the center seam, the notches and the edges. I've used lots of pins on this section because I want to keep this curve nice and smooth. Stitch with 1/4 inch seam allowance and then trim that seam allowance down by half. Then give your completed panel a good press. So here I'm bringing all of the 3 sections together, the back panel, the wadding and the front, and I'm just pinning them all together so that they are nice and smooth before I put them under the needle. So here's the panel now stitched. So I've only stitched through the seam allowance, so you can see from the back where I have actually stitched, and I've also stitched all the way around to secure it onto the wadding. Then I'm going to move on to doing some free motion stitching, so see you in a minute. Right, so I finished my free motion stitching, and that's what it looks like on the back. I've gone a bit crazy, maybe a bit overkill, but I was really enjoying myself, so that's been fun. So this is the front, so I just need to now trim around that front panel, and I want to keep this mat about 13 inches square, so I know that I'm going to be cutting quite close to the edge of the original panel, so I'm going to trim that up, and then we're going to put the binding on. So the binding I've cut to 2.5 inches wide, and I have then joined each section, so I've got a really nice long section that I know will fit around the whole placemat. I'm no expert at binding at all. This is quite new to me. I have done binding in the past, and it is definitely an art form which you need to practice. So this, yet again, this is quite a good thing to practice on. So once you've got your binding cut and stitched together, you join it together with wrong sides together so that both of the raw edges meet, and those raw edges will then be placed onto the raw edge of your placemat as such. So because watching various videos, I like the mitered corner. So this is done by, I've already started one off. So this is done by, first of all, you've got a tail. So you've got this really nice long tail that will be joined up eventually when you come all the way around. So I've given myself a nice long tail, and I have then stitched the first little bit of my binding, so you can see it is, and I decided on a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I've got 1 centimetre stitched down to 1 centimetre before the edge of my placemat, so it stops 1 centimetre before, and then I stitch into that corner. By doing that stitching, you fold it back, and you've got this nice sort of mitered corner going on, and then the binding is then folded back on itself, and keep all of your raw edges together, and there you can see all the raw edges are together there. And then you stitch from 1 centimetre from the top of the placemat, and you continue all the way down, and then when you get to your next corner you do exactly the same as you did on this corner, and you work all of your way around to your last corner. And then what I'm going to do is, when I get to my last corner, I'm just going to literally stitch a little bit into this last edge. So I've got a really long opening, and this is where I join my binding together. Right, so the binding has been put on all the way around except for this last little bit where we're going to join it together. So what I've done is I have folded back the binding. So I folded back the binding there, and this little bit comes up, and I folded that back as well there, and I pressed it. So when I pressed it, let me show you, I pressed it so that there's a tiny little gap of probably about 1/8 of an inch, and when you press it, what happens is you get a cross in the fabric, a crease, and I've highlighted it by actually drawing it with erasable pen. So you can see where it's been pressed. So there's this cross, and there's one on the other side, and you bring those together. So you need to just fold your fabric out of the way. So I'm going to do this on the overhead camera so you can see it better, because it's difficult holding it up.
So the 2 pieces of binding are now folded back on each other, and I have left a small gap in between the 2 of them, and I will press these 2 so you can see where they have actually been pressed, because it will create a cross in the fabric. So I have used an erasable pen to just bring out that cross a bit more so you can see it better, and these 2 crosses will eventually be brought together to join the 2 binding pieces. So you can see here the bottom piece of this binding needs to be joined to the bottom piece of the other piece of binding. So you need to make sure that you get these around the right way. So I've written bottom on the 2 pieces of binding just to make sure that I attach them correctly. So here you will see I'm going to pin back the placemat and join these 2 pieces of binding. So I've got my top piece with the bottom section closest to the other piece, and then I'm going to place the other piece on top. So I'm now aligning the 2 crosses just to make sure that they match. So you can see that I'm just double checking underneath that the cross matches the one on top. So they're both literally sitting on top of each other, and then it's pinned down. So once they're pinned, you stitch from this corner through the cross to the end of that corner. So once you've stitched, it's always good to just double check that you have actually stitched it the right way around. So I'm just going to take that off, and if you just pull it, you can see, yeah, that's okay. So with that being okay, you can now trim this bit of the binding back. So I'm just going to trim that off, and then that sits nice and flatly, and then I can just literally stitch down my 1 centimetre seam allowance, finishing off the binding. Right, the binding has now been stitched all the way around, and I have pressed the binding flat, which will make it easier to bring to the back, and that's what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to clip it all into place before I stitch it. Right, so it's
it's all clipped into place now, which is going to make it easier to stitch. Now when I stitch from the back, and I just follow the previous stitch line I made when I was attaching the binding. Some people prefer to stitch from the front and stitch in the ditch, but for me personally, I prefer the look of it from the back. So I'm going to stitch that now, and when that one's finished, I'll show you all of them. So here we go. So it's now completed. So I have stitched around the back, and I've kept my stitching quite close to the edge, and I've just followed the existing stitch line that I did when I originally stitched the binding on, and for me that works out quite nicely. It doesn't come through on the front, and the mitered corners are just such a lovely clean look on these placemats. So I've now finished all 6 of them, so I'll just show you each of them. So this is the first one with a matching one, similar. And then these 2, different backs. And then these 2, different backs. So those are my Christmassy placemats. They were such fun to make, and I know that if I wanted to make any more of these going forward, I have my little cut out pieces of pattern, and I could just make these up as and when I wanted to. And if I wanted to go a step further, I could make maybe a few up and make them into heat mats by inserting some of the Insole Bright in between the main panel and the bottom panel, so that I could put hot pots on them without ruining my work surfaces. But at the moment I'm really pleased with my placemats, and I know that if I wanted to make some of these using up any sort of scrap fabric that I have in my sewing room, I could use those, so I could have these placemats all year round and not just for Christmas. The other thing I just want to say is that you don't have to use free motion stitching. You can use any stitching. You can just go up and down in diagonal lines, or you could, if you want, just use your walking foot to put very small waves into your fabric. I mean, you can just play with these and have some fun. I enjoyed making these because it gave me an opportunity to practice my binding, because I haven't found that easy in the past, but with practicing, you know, quite a bit on these, it has worked out really well. So I just feel that these have come out really nicely. So I can't think of anything else to make with my Christmas fabric, so if I do, I will let you know. But hopefully you have enjoyed the content of this video, and if you are a subscriber, thank you for joining me. But if you aren't, it would be really nice if you could subscribe, and I will see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.